All right, so I am going to Singapore in a couple of weeks, and my flight will leave on Thursday, June 8th, and then it is going to basically get back to the US a few days later on that next Monday. It is a 16-hour flight both ways, and so I will basically only have about 3 days actually there in Singapore. So that's basically like a long weekend trip, and most people would not do a long weekend trip like that, but I am not most people, and so I'm gonna do it. I am about to purchase the ticket, and it looks like I'm done. Okay, and here we are with the hotel, and I am booking it, and that's also done. Now, I can't believe I just did that. To be honest, it's a decision that I've been agonizing over for the past few days. So let me tell you a little bit more about why I made it. And how did this get started? How did I even get interested in the country of Singapore? Well, like many things in life, it actually started with a guy. A while back, I was seeing this guy who was from Singapore. He was living in the US for a short period of time. And I knew when I met him that he was going to be leaving eventually, but we saw each other for a while anyway. And at some point, we even had the discussion of whether I would ever want to move with him, as evidenced by the fact that I am still in San Francisco. That did not happen, which is fine. We're still friends. Things ended up working out okay. But anyway, he moved back, and I still was really interested in the country. It's like when I was with him, we talked so much about the country and I learned so much about it from him. And I just got really interested in it and probably also developed a little bit of emotional, attachment to the idea of going there. And ever since that all got started, it's like when you buy a new car and then all you see on the street is that same car. Well, that's what kind of happened with me. It's like I couldn't get it out of my mind. I saw references to Singapore everywhere. A couple of coworkers who used to live there, some friends who have family there and who came from there, that whole Crazy Rich Asians movie, which takes place in large part there. And so I've just been seeing it everywhere, and I'm like, I gotta go and see it for myself. I kind of like the challenge and novelty of doing a short and last minute trip like this. One time a few years ago, I actually went to Rome basically for a weekend for a wedding, and I was jet lagged like the entire time, but it was still worth it. I had a fantastic time at the wedding. I actually saw a lot of Rome in the middle of the night, including the Colosseum, because that was the only time that I was awake. So it was more than worth it, even with the jet lag. As far as the length of the trip, I'm only gonna be there for a few days, but I think I actually like shorter trips. I get a little bit antsy if I'm in a place for more than a few days. And I think it's just gonna be a fun challenge. Like I've been reading up on all these tips for how to reduce jet lag. And just with my job and my life, it's hard to plan a really long trip far in advance. And so trips like this just never happen basically. And there's places in the world and things that I wanna see that I just never end up seeing. But if I can prove to myself that short last minute trips like this work, then it might mean that I go on other trips like this in the future and I just see a lot more than I would have otherwise. And another thing on my mind is that I still might want to try living in Asia at some point in the future. I've been living in the Bay Area for 10 years. I've been working for the same company for like 15 years on and off, and I still really like things here and I really like things in my company, and even if I moved, I would probably still try to stay with that company just abroad. But it's like I might want to change things up eventually, and Singapore is one of the most Western kind of friendly countries in Asia. But anyways, like I've been thinking about this. It's been a little bit of a dream on my mind, and I figure I better just go and actually see what it's like before I get too carried away. Now, as I hinted before, I think one of the biggest challenges of this trip is going to be the jet lag. The problem is once I get to Singapore, I'm only going to be there for about 2 or 3 days. Luckily, I have been reading about this and I think I got a plan. First of all, apparently the jet lag is not as bad when you're going from east to west. And so it's probably actually not gonna be nearly as bad as that time that I went to Rome. So basically what's gonna happen is that I'm gonna arrive in Singapore at 6:45 p.m. Singapore time on Friday, and I am leaving tomorrow at about 11 a.m. Thursday PST in the US. So apparently the best way to do this is to stay up later tonight and start adjusting kind of before the trip. So yeah, it is about 8 p.m. right now, and I figured that if I can stay up late until like 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 a.m., then go to bed and then maybe get a few hours of sleep on the plane just for the first part, but then ideally stay awake for the entire rest of the plane ride, land in Singapore in the evening on Friday, and then the main challenge will be just to stay up until a normal bedtime, like at least 11 or 12, and then hopefully I will be basically adjusted on the first day. I was told by a friend that I should download an app called Grab, which is basically like the Uber for Southeast Asia. It looks like this. All right, so now I gotta pack. I was just looking at the weather. It looks like it's going to be hot and humid. Yeah, it says it's gonna be a high of 88 degrees the days I'm there and a low of 81 to 82. Now, the other thing that I like to do is preload all of my devices with content, especially for a long plane ride that is gonna be 16 hours. And that is typically books, make sure I have something on here. And then I have my 2 iPads, which is overkill, but I use them for different things. And I like to download YouTube videos and episodes of TV shows that I'm trying to catch up on. So now I gotta actually plan the trip, figure out where I'm going.
But the most dangerous thing about Pandora is that you may grow to love her too much.
All right, and I made it. It is 4:08 a.m. I am feeling super excited for the trip now. Maybe part of it was I was inspired by that movie and just all of the work they put into it. All right, and it is the next morning. Oh, really?
They take a lot of work.
Last part of my plan for reducing jet lag is to actually set my watch to Singapore time. Apparently these planes now have like special lighting and stuff like that to help with jet lag as well. It's always a little interesting filming in public, but I just actually ran into a guy in the airport who saw me vlogging and asked me, hey, are you a vlogger? And it led to a little bit of a fun conversation, and he also asked me for my channel information. And the selection of movies actually looks pretty excellent on this flight, so hopefully I'll be well entertained. All right, I'm out here. It's Saturday morning, and as you can see, I am going for a run, and this is in an area called Gardens by the Bay. First observation is that it is really hot. It says it is 83 degrees right now, and that is supposed to get to about 87. It is humid. I'm not used to the humidity. And you know, it's just a little bit surreal being here so far because I've barely seen any of the city, but as of right now, it just feels like kind of a normal city. Like it doesn't feel as foreign as I thought it might. The one big thing is that I just barely know anyone in this entire country. So there's a lot of tourists from different parts of the continent. One thing that has happened is that there are a lot of people staring at me. Basically, they're waving at me, they're making like kind of this kind of motion, basically complimenting me on how I look, which is not something that happens in the US very often, even though I sometimes run shirtless there too. I guess maybe I am more of a rarity here. I'm like sitting on this bench and I literally just had a swarm of people come over and ask if they could take a picture with me. And so I just sat here for like 5 minutes and they each took turns taking pictures with me. And one of the guys said, your body, beautiful. That has never happened before. That was pretty entertaining. It's Sunday, which is my second full day here, and I am at a hawker center called Maxwell Food Center. The hawker centers are one of the most popular places that people will eat here. Whenever I asked my friends for recommendations, everyone said you have to go to a hawker center. I got this thing called chicken rice, or chicken and rice. I forget which one it is, but apparently it is one of the most popular dishes in Singapore, and one of my friends told me that pretty much every American that he has ever talked to loves it, and I have to say after having it twice, I love it as well. So a couple interesting things about this experience. First of all, it is just really crowded here. And then the second thing, which is probably even more interesting, is that apparently there's just not very much crime in Singapore, including stealing your stuff. I heard from my friend that basically the way that you reserve a table is that you just leave one of your belongings there. He says that he just leaves like a credit card at the table and then he goes to get his food. And he was like, yeah, I could leave my phone, I could leave my bag, I could leave my camera, and basically no one will steal it. And one of the reasons is because there are lots of cameras everywhere, which I'm not sure how I feel about that, but What it basically means is that if someone were to steal something, it would probably be caught on camera. And then my friend was telling me that basically within 24 hours you can go to the police and they can recover it like immediately. So that's why no one steals anything. So today I experimented by leaving some of my stuff at the table, not only to go get my food, but also I realized when I got in the line that it was cash only, so I had to walk like all the way across the street, find an ATM, get cash, come back, and that whole thing took me like 20 minutes or something. And then I had to stand in line for my food, which took another 10 or 15 minutes. And by the time I got back, my stuff was still there. It was like amazing. Now that I'm back, I have to say that that trip was 1000% worth it. So the first thing is that it has helped me prove to myself that trips like this can be done. At first I was really worried that a lot of things would really mess up the trip, but I have to say that after all of that, the trip was great. And now that I've done this kind of trip, it makes me more confident that in the future, other short, extended, long weekends, maybe those can be worth it too. So the second thing that this trip has really helped me with is confronting my fears about what other people will think. I guess this really starts out with that story that I told you at the beginning about the guy that I was seeing. And there was a time early on when I was seeing him that I actually had the opportunity to go to Singapore. And I have to confess that I didn't go. And the reason that I didn't go was that I was afraid of what other people would think. The particular thing for me then was that it was still pretty early on in the time that I was getting to know him, but I was already thinking, okay, if this works out, would I ever want to move with him when he is going back? But I knew that it was early and that a lot of people would think that, hey, that's really early to be thinking about that. But now when I'm looking back, I really wish I would have just gone on the trip because it would have made my life a lot easier. So now when you think about this trip, I was also afraid of what other people would think, but for different reasons. It's a short trip, kind of expensive to do a trip like this, and most people just wouldn't think it's worth it to go all the way to Asia for a long weekend, essentially. But when it came down to it, I just really regretted not going that first time a couple years ago, and I did not want to have that same regret this time. But I was really agonizing over it for a while, and I actually even sat down and did this exercise, which has been called fear setting. It's from a somewhat famous author named Tim Ferriss, who wrote the book called The 4-Hour Workweek. But basically in this exercise, you sit down and you just write out a few different things. The first thing you write is, what is it that you are afraid of doing? The second thing you write is a list of what are the worst things that could possibly happen if you were to do that thing. So then the third thing that you write down is, what are some of the things that you can do to prevent those things from happening, or at least reduce the chances of them happening even by a little bit. The fourth thing you want to write down is, if those bad things happen, what are the things that you can do to repair them, that you can use to recover from them? And then number 5, what are the potential benefits of a success? All right, and then number 6, what are the potential costs of inaction? What are those hidden consequences that you may not immediately think of, but that if you really think about it, are costs that you want to be aware of? And for me, these include things like losing the chance to go visit the country. Like, who knows when I'm gonna get enough time off work again to be able to do this, if ever. And then the other hidden cost is that I might continue to live my life holding myself back from doing things that I want to do only because I'm afraid of what other people might think, or other random bad things that might happen that actually aren't really that likely to happen. So basically I did this exercise and I came to the conclusion that most likely this trip would be a really, really positive thing in my life. And now that I'm looking back at the trip, that is basically what happened. All of the good stuff happened plus more. So as I said before, this trip was like 1000% worth it. All right, so where do we go from here? Well, right now I have not really made any decisions, but this trip has definitely inspired me to hopefully go back to Singapore someday, even if it's just for a short period of time, and also hopefully to go visit some other countries in Asia. The idea that I'm toying around with right now is that through my job, I have the really good opportunity to take kind of a couple of months off as a sabbatical. And so I might try to do that in the next year or two. And then beyond that, who knows, maybe one day I will relocate there for a year, 2 years, who knows? I think it could be a really fun adventure. So this is a topic I'm really curious if you all have anything to say about, especially if you're from one of these countries, if you've lived in one of these countries, if you spent time in one of these countries. I would really love to know what your experience was like. Definitely the positive, but maybe even more importantly, the negative. So if you have something to say, please leave them in the comments down below. Or if you know me personally, just text me and I'd love to chat about it. All right, that'll do it for this video. If you liked it, hit the like button, which will help others find it, and subscribe for more. Peace.